Now moving on to the select board meeting.
I move to adopt the agenda.
Do we have a second?
I'll second.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have it. Approval of the minutes for October 9th.
I'll make the motion to approve the minutes for October 9th.
I'll second it.
Any discussion? None being heard. All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Aye. Opposed?
Opposed.
Ayes have it. Town manager's report.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the board, members of the public. I did submit my report in advance, and I'm happy to answer any questions about it. I would say that in developments today, I had a really interesting meeting with Green Mountain Power about resilience. Actually, it's very appropriate for tonight, right? We know that Comcast internet is down. Some of the communication within the town, even within emergency services in the town, has been altered. I won't say super disrupted, but there's alternate things happening that don't usually happen. So in speaking with Green Mountain Power today about resilience, they have some ideas about perhaps some battery backup for the town office building, which is our emergency operations center. And the conversation then kind of moved into an economic development mode, and they had some thoughts about federal assistance for repair and replacement of electric car charging stations, which we could maybe avail ourselves of if the time comes. And also possibility of getting in line for a level 3 fast charger in Brandon, as they're trying to kind of dish those out around Vermont in strategic locations. So it was an interesting conversation. But happy to answer questions.
Any questions for the town manager from the board?
No, thank you.
Any from the public? None being heard, we'll move on to the rec director's report.
Thank you, Chair. Rec Director report, fall sports ended this week, or ending this week. Big thank you to our soccer coaches. John Freeze coaches the U6, Justin Martell coaches U8. U10 girls, Nate Reitman, who actually was somebody we picked up at a meeting here, which was nice. Did a fantastic job. U10 boys coaches, Ron and Cassandra Koval. U12 girls coaches, Lily Bixby and Laura Miner. And as a reminder, that was a combination team we did with Pittsford Rec this year due to low numbers, and it was a successful collaboration. U12 boys coaches, Brent Wilbur, Miles Crayons. This year we got some sponsorship from Pocket Pest Control and McGee CEJR. First and second grade football, Megan and Bill Rose. Third and fourth grade flag football, Joe Desbridge and Matt Mallory. Fifth and sixth grade flag football, Duke Whitney, Scott Quinneville. Seventh and eighth grade flag football, Duke Whitney and Daniel Whitney. Basketball season's coming. We've opened up a free skills and drills clinic for fifth and sixth grade at the Neshby School starting this week at Spiller for November doldrums. The regular season basketball registration is open as of 9 a.m. today. This is for grades 3 through 6 as their season starts at the end of November, 5th and 6th grade, and second week of December, 3rd and 4th grade. The pre-K second grade starts at the beginning of January. Preseason meetings with the new, due to the retirement of Coach Greg Babcock, wrestling coach team is happening this week. The Brandon Pittsford Rec are going back to see the Boston Celtics. We haven't posted the tickets yet, but the tickets will be for December 29th game versus Toronto Raptors. Spooksville is back this Friday, October 27th at Estabrook. And Beautified Brandon, which is a new offering, is seeing not 7, now 10 households registered for the decorating contest. Winners to be announced at Spooksville this Friday.
Thank you. Any questions for the rec director from the board?
I got one.
Yes.
A few meetings ago, a couple months, we heard about commissioners. Any update on commissioners?
So I've been speaking with Manager Hopkins and talking about creating commissioners. I'm actually meeting with somebody tomorrow to talk about being a commissioner for some of our non-traditional sports stuff like our martial arts, dance, to provide some sort of, some help with me as far as not getting overwhelmed with doing all the jobs all the time. And so she and I are meeting tomorrow, and if this works out, this could be a good path forward for us with their sports.
How much will this cost us?
I haven't made it, I mean, I'm hopeful that she'll do it for next to nothing, but we haven't even talked price, and we haven't talked about the structure of what will happen first of all. You know, she initially was somebody who reached out about volunteering for us. I would feel bad about taking advantage of that, but if she wanted to volunteer, certainly allow it, but I do feel like it's something that, you know, if it works out well enough, that she should be compensated for her time. It's tough to find people to volunteer, it's tough to find people to work, let alone people to volunteer, and having, you know, that relationship with them, that there is a, I guess, an employer-employee relationship, makes it a little easier to do the, to lead them, I guess. Again, we're finding it more and more difficult to find volunteers. You know, the days of, you know, a couple dads, a couple moms getting together and coaching a little league team and having it go swimmingly without misorganization is gone. And it's the reason why rec departments exist throughout the country. They've taken over for youth sports management. In fact, the rec department, there was a youth sports club in Bristol that quite recently just folded and now has moved into the rec department because of, again, some of the problems that they have with volunteers. It's the new world we live in. People have gotten busy. The idea that volunteers are going to solve all the problems is not there. I mean, I'm hoping that it's a pendulum as opposed to just a downward spiral, you know, and then we swing back and everyone wants to volunteer in 5 or 10 years, but that's not where we're at right now.
Okay. Any other questions for the rec director from the board? Any from the public?
Excuse me, just a quick one for the rec director.
Yes, sir.
Is Brandon's official trick-or-treating night Friday?
No, it's Halloween. We don't change the date of Halloween.
No, I know, but a lot of towns
Oh.
schedule trick-or-treating for a day that is not followed by a school day.
We just wish the teachers luck around here.
I don't want
Take
to,
'em. I don't want them in my house.
I personally don't want the responsibility of changing the Halloween date. You know, it's been kicked around. There used to be a Halloween parade that doesn't happen anymore. That, you know, and just the idea of that moving and went away was an uproar within our community. So Halloween is Halloween. We don't have to worry about Devil's Night anymore because the kids are all busy inside playing on their things. So there's no destruction the night before. So.
What's the fun of that?
Right, yes. Eggs can be sold in Brandon on the 30th of Halloween.
Anything else from the public? If not, we'll move on to public comment. Anything from the board? Heather?
No.
Brian?
I do. I heard from some members of the primary kindergarten teaching team at Neshobe School, and they were disappointed that the Brandon PD had declined to come and talk to the students about how police officers are an important part of the community. Luckily, when they asked the Burlington police, they were more than pleased to come and bring their canine officer and dog. And interestingly enough, everyone else that they have asked is willing to meet with classes, the bank, transfer station, Hannaford, fire department, post office, all going to help Neshobe kindergartners learn what it means to live in the community. What a missed opportunity for the Brandon Police Department to have been involved in such a great community outreach project.
Mr. Giles, anything?
Nothing for me, thanks.
Anything, you know, shifting to the public? It's not on the agenda.
Yep, just want to announce for the Energy Committee, we're putting on a button-up, green-up, save-up day for homeowners on November 8th. So this will be from 5 to 7. There'll be a light meal and a lot of information about how to make solar heat pumps and weatherization work for your home, and the incentives and support that's out there to make that a viable thing for homeowners in Brandon. And just as a footnote, Goshen has a couple people that have volunteered for our committee, and they've asked if they could be part of this, and so we've opened the door to their residents to participate as well.
All right, thank you. And what time was that?
November 8th, 5 to 7, 5:30 to 7. Just need to register online at SolarFest, who's a co-sponsor, solarfest.org/Brandon.
Thank you. Anything else from the community? It's not on the agenda.
I'd like to reply, just inquire as to what Mr. Bennett was saying about the school. I was never contacted by the school, and our officers are always willing to go out to the schools. I know we've had our K-9 officer go out to the school, so I'm not sure what's going on with the Neshobe School. I was never contacted by anybody about doing any such
All I know is-
participation. If you had a name or something, I could follow up with that, I would appreciate it.
Well, I don't think there's any point in following up now, because they've already set with Burlington Police, but they called the police station, and I'm not sure who called, I just received that note, and I thought I'd pass it along.
No, like I said, I'm always willing to have people go out to the school. I'm very involved with the schools. That's why, like I said, if I was contacted about that, but, and I work Monday through Friday, so I do not recall being contacted by the school asking for us to participate in any particular event or function. I don't recall that at all. But I can follow up with the school tomorrow and find out about that, but that perplexes me as well, so.
That'd be good. Thank you. Anything else from the public? If not, we'll move on to item 6, confirm dates of the FY25 budget workshop series. Wednesday, November 8th, 2023, 7 to 9. Monday, November 20th, 6 to 8. Tuesday, December 5th, 6 to 8. And Monday, December 18th, 6 to 8. Is everybody okay with that on the board?
Is the first one really 7?
Yes, that was a
Okay.
requested change from somebody on the,
That's fine, I just wanted to
Yeah.
make sure that that was...
that's why we
I'm trying
went
to
to.
fit 2 meetings in that night, so I'll leave a little early from one. and make the-
Totally fine, I just wanted to make sure that I didn't.
Thank you for actually pointing that out, because I wouldn't want people to miss the time change.
Anything else from the rest of the board? From our town manager?
No, I don't think you need to vote or anything.
No,
but
I know we don't need to
we'll,
vote or anything, it's just,
We'll warn these as a special meeting tomorrow or the next day.
okay,
Thank you.
thank you.
I have a question. Sam.
Yes.
Can anyone attend these?
Absolutely, it's an open meeting.
So they'll be in this room.
Okay.
We won't have a Zoom option though,
Okay,
unless the board wants to, the board can choose to, but generally we not have Zoom.
No. Unless there's, I would say unless there's a request, like if somebody says, I want to come, but I have COVID. But unless there's a special request, I would prefer in person.
number 7, consider naming proposed private road off the Steinberg Road as Jupiter Lane.
Mr. Chair, so you have a little cover memorandum there, which is a letter I sent out and a map showing the location. And then Elaine provided the street naming ordinance for your reference. I would like to clarify that, or not clarify, but announce that since the packet was sent out, there has been a modification to the request. I have cleared the modification with Elaine, who's the DPW clerk, and with Tom Kilpeck, who's the E911 coordinator. They both agree that there's no need to restart the process, but the suggested name is now no longer Jupiter Lane. The suggested name is Juniper Lane.
How
And
come?
I should,
Why? I'm just curious.
I would say it was at the, well, I'm making the request for the
Yeah.
modification at the request of the original requestor.
and I need to disclose that I am part of the requesters. This is an
Okay.
affordable housing group that purchased 2 pieces of land, and in order to put any houses on them, we had to have a road there.
Oh,
And
okay.
so if people are uncomfortable, I guess the easiest thing for me to do is just to recuse from this vote.
But it wasn't like anything,
think
contentious. It was
Mr.
just-
Jupiter has a point.
Oh, yeah.
All right, so yeah, this, full disclosure, so my husband is part of this group with Mr. Giles, and I did not realize that the road was going to be called Jupiter Lane until I saw it on the agenda, and I was not down with it, so I asked for a change.
Fair enough. That's fine. I didn't mean to embarrass you. I just
No,
wanted to make sure it
that was-
wasn't like
There's nothing nefarious, just
something contentious where we were
No,
gonna
no,
be
this
slighting
wasn't-
somebody.
wasn't ready for that, and I'm happy.
A
Thank
few
you.
years. That's fine.
So what's the pleasure of the board?
I move that we allow the name Juniper, is it Juniper Lane? Juniper Lane.
Juniper Lane.
Be named.
I'll second.
Any discussion? None being heard? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it. And I'm gonna
Opportunity
open,
to join the grand group of neighborhoods who developers have named all the streets after their children's and family.
You all come around back to it, build some more streets.
number 8, discussion out-of-town police response and possible sub-regional policing models. I'm gonna turn that over to the town manager, who I'm sure will turn it over to Chief Jadian.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, so this is on the agenda because it came up just in natural discussion at the previous board meeting, and it was suggested that it deserved a topic of its own on a warrant agenda, so it's a warrant agenda item now. You have in the packet a draft of what an outreach letter to a neighboring community such as Goshen might look like. The chief has also included the calls that have been made for service from Goshen for the last 6 months or so. And then there's a draft of the actual, what the agreement would look like. So I can turn it over to the chief if he would like to speak to it.
Good evening. Which subject would you like to discuss first? Would it be the,
Just the outreach to Goshen.
okay, yeah. So, obviously, law enforcement is expensive. And in Vermont, between the dispatching issue that we've been dealing with for probably since the 60s in Vermont, where the state police have been covering almost every municipality without charging anything, that is all going to change in the near future. So just like anything else, if you consolidate resources, whether it's dispatching, fire, police, EMS, at the end of the day, it's less expensive. You can pool resources, even stuff such as grants. When you put in for grants, you're more apt to get grants if you do it in as a district or a regional wide proposal rather than if it would just be like, let's say, the town of Brandon. So the pool resources can help reduce the costs of policing, fire, EMS, and it's worked in other states. Michigan, especially in Pennsylvania, they've created regional police departments. Some communities, and we're fortunate in Brandon that we can afford a police department, but some can't, but they still have a need for policing. Those numbers that I gave to the town manager, I just happened to be running them recently. The town of Goshen last year, and they're handled by state police, New Haven, and also state police, Rockland, kind of was available. They had 12 calls for service in 2022. This year alone, in the last 6 months, they have 25 calls for service, which is a huge jump. Some of them are serious, some of them aren't so serious, but some of the people in Goshen, including some of the select board heads, indicated that they may be interested in reaching out for some additional policing services. We were fortunate, like I said, to have a police department that can provide those services on a pay-for-play schedule, basically. My proposal would be to have them provide a flat fee to handle administrative, gas, equipment, what have you, regardless if we went to 1 call for service per year or if we did 100. It's just a basic flat administrative fee. And then every time that we would respond to an emergency call in the town, it would be $150. It could be something as basic as a VIN verification all the way up to an active domestic, that they would have to pay us to respond to those calls. And the information that I've received so far is that they're not looking for patrol or traffic enforcement. They're just looking for emergency calls for service. The system that they have right now, and like many communities in Vermont, is to have the state police as your default agency. They're spread so thin these days that the response time can be anywhere up to 20 minutes to a half an hour, and that's for a serious emergency, whereas basically Goshen is an extension of Forestdale, is the way I look at it. It's not that far, especially if it's a life or death situation. We are basically the only law enforcement agency close to them. So in speaking with the town manager, we've been talking about this for a while, and even going forward, when the dispatch issue comes up again, where every community is going to have to pay for that, there's not going to be any freebies. It's a lot less expensive if we join with our brother and sister communities around Brandon to pool our resources. We have basically an anchor police department here that can provide the services, but maybe by them paying into this for contract services, we could have that lower our dispatch costs for dispatching down the line, which is going to be expensive. And whether you have a police department, fire department, or EMS service, everybody's going to have to pay down the line. It's not going to be a choice. I think everybody's going to be forced to make that decision, and there really isn't going to be a decision. We're all going to have to pay for it no matter where we live. I'm not a Brandon resident, but where I live, I'm going to have to pay for that as a taxpayer as well. So I'm trying to get ahead of this where we can lower the cost for our taxpayers too. Like I said, we have a police department that can provide these services, and they're not looking for us to be up there doing proactive policing or traffic enforcement. They're just looking for someone to cover them when they have an emergency call. So that's one of the things in the proposal that I've written up, and I gave them basically a menu of services. If they eventually wanted traffic enforcement, that would cost them a little more. If they wanted to do ordinance violation enforcement, that would be a little more. But obviously, we don't want the taxpayers of Brandon to have to foot the bill for that, because that's not reasonable. But if they want to pay for that service and then be able to possibly lower the Brandon PD budget by, like I said, those administrative fees, I think that's a wise decision going forward. Like I said, eventually we're going to have to do it with dispatching, and I'm sure that the fire chief could concur, is that's going to be a cost coming down the line.
Oh, eventually dispatching will be, as soon as the legislature gets it passed through to the state. The state has decided that they have to be able to fund whatever direction. They're not going to just kick us out of the state police until they have a plan with funding available for it. So I think we have a little bit of time, but eventually we will be paying. Most other communities pay, whether they're a large enough community to dispatch for themselves, or they have signed into a contract with another dispatching service. But eventually it will come, and it will cost us per call.
And personally, I would rather get ahead of a problem than wait till it just comes up and bites us and we have this huge cost that we're going to have to pay. Again, it's not going to necessarily pay for it all, but if all these other communities around, and I like to think of the area around Brandon sort of as if you're on it. We have Goshen, we have Leicester, we have Sudbury, Pittsburgh possibly, but anywhere around there, those are agencies that don't have their own police department with the exception of Pittsburgh. If we could contract with them, it's like I said, an anchor department, be able to provide those services, we might be able to lower our bottom dollar at the end of the day. And just like I said, I'd rather get ahead of this problem and try to lower the tax rate for our, or at least what the taxpayers in Brandon are paying for police services. If we can get some of these other communities to sort of kick in, and we can provide them with the service at a much less expensive rate than, say, probably the sheriff's department at this point if they wanted to contract with them. But even the sheriff's department right now, they're extremely shorthanded. State police is extremely shorthanded. And I know the academy is having trouble right now keeping up with what little recruits we have in the academy, but I think we lost 10 already out of the academy, out of a class of 54, I believe. Like I said, that's one of the proposals I wanted to make, is to approach Goshen about possibly contracting with services for limited policing to answer calls for service, emergency calls.
I'm gonna, I'm gonna let Chief finish, and then we'll open it up for discussion from the board.
Oh, I'm all set with that section.
Okay. I'm gonna open it up for discussion from the board.
So this list of calls that you provided, these are all ones, it sounded to me at the last meeting like it was something where maybe I'm getting this wrong, but it sounded to me like the police code of conduct or whatever you have to like adhere to kind of made you responsible if Goshen called anyway?
It depends on the circumstance. A lot of
Okay.
times, Vermont, as far as policing goes, we have a very limited amount of officers to go around the state. Now, I know there's been some concerns about us answering calls for service in these other communities, but we're actually not answering calls. We're not, at the end of the day, making the arrests, we may do a small little report, but 99.9% of the time, what we're doing is we're responding to these communities for life or death emergencies. We're not going there and covering calls for service where it's gonna do an undue burden on the taxpayers or on the police department. If we were tied up, and obviously Brandon comes first, if we had a domestic and Goshen had a domestic and the state police called us, we're going to deal with the domestic in Brandon first. That's just what the taxpayers pay for, and that's our obligation. But at the end of the day, if there's a lot of times it's an agency assist, and I could go down, I've actually broken it down. So far this year, we've gone to 4, I'm just gonna remove my glasses because I can't see anything anymore. We've gone to 4 calls to Goshen this year. One was recently for a serious motor vehicle accident with very bad injuries. VSP was at least 20 minutes away. We were right down the street. We've also received mostly calls for assistance there. We had some people locked their keys out of the car. All we did was made a telephone call to the local tow service. And then we had a call, suspicious vehicle on the Brandon-Goshen line. We weren't able to determine what town it was in, so we responded. It ended up being in Goshen, so we didn't end up dealing with it. In Sudbury, we have an officer, one of our officers who lives in Sudbury, so pretty much all the calls there were things that he just came across on his way home or on his way in from work. Most of them were motor vehicle stops. And one recently was a large underage drinking party, but again, that was by the request of the state police. Pittsford is a little bit of a different animal. Pittsford and Brandon have a very good working relationship, the 2 police departments, and they'll call us for backup, and we'll call them for backup on occasion, and it's almost a tit for tat type of thing. We don't expect anything from them, they don't expect anything else as far as restitution for a call, because there's sometimes where we have 3 or 4 calls going at once, and we don't have enough officers. They'll literally come over and cover our calls for us. So it's almost like a mutual aid type of relationship. And so far this year, we've been to 9 calls to assist Pittsford. Leicester, this year, actually, it's been very busy. We've had the shooting up there, and actually our officers, along with Middlebury PD, backed up the state police there, and our officers were actually the ones to clear the house looking for the suspects, while the troopers and the Middlebury officer did first aid on the gentleman who ended up passing away. But obviously, there's not enough people to handle those calls, so we go to assist them. I believe that same day we had an individual, obviously for confidential reasons, I'm not going to say what road it was, but we went there to secure the scene. A woman had committed suicide in her backyard and shot herself in the head. So VSP again was not available. We went out there to deal with that. We didn't do the investigation, but we maintained the scene until state police got there. But all of these, most of them were violent domestics where the troopers were asking for backup. And at the end of the day, like I said, we obviously are employed by the town of Brandon, but just like with the fire departments and a lot of times these days, EMS, we assist one another in the communities around us because it's something that we're morally obligated to. We swear an oath to serve and protect, and I can't imagine anybody here, if we got a call for Goshen and there was a extremely bad accident and the person was a couple hundred feet over the town line and someone was about to pass away or someone's having a heart attack, we're not just going to sit there at the town line and watch them just because, you know, they're not going to like compensate us for doing it. And I would like to think, and it happens all the time, that other agencies will come into Brandon to assist us, and they don't expect anything. It's just what we do. Same with the fire department, same with EMS. When we get a call for an emergency, we go. Obviously, at the end of the day, our primary responsibility is the town of Brandon, and that's what we'll put as a priority. But if someone else asks us for help, we're not gonna say no to them. That's just, like I said, we've all sworn an oath to serve and protect and preserve life and property, so that's what we're gonna do. I do understand the concern about going into other communities and having that cost passed along to Brandon, because that's not what the taxpayers here should be doing. But again, there's certain times where it's just needed, where we need to go deal with emergencies. Like I said, we're usually, anytime they call us, we're not doing the investigation, we're not tying ourselves up for hours of paperwork. A lot of times, it's a couple lines, went to Leicester, assisted Vermont State Police with the domestic. As soon as they controlled the scene, we cleared that and ended our involvement, so it really doesn't tax our resources too much. But and I'll say this, at the end of the day, we certainly don't want to go into other communities and take their calls either, because none of us like to be tied up on a 3-hour domestic or a DUI or anything else. So if we can just go, do what we need to do, and then leave, we're just as happy with that. Those are the type of calls we'd rather have. So.
Thank you, but just to make it clear that we are talking just about Goshen. I know that Sudbury, Leicester.
None of them, this is just
This is just Goshen we're talking about.
I was just trying to elaborate,
Right.
and I know it was a
No, I
concern
understand that,
with
but
the
I just
cost.
want to make it clear for
Yes.
clarification. Any other?
Yeah, I have some questions. First, would it be possible for you to sit beside Bill?
Oh,
So
absolutely.
you're
I'm
not
sorry.
in the back of me, it's just hard to see you.
Sorry about that.
Thanks. So I noticed in the document you put into our packet, the incidents, 25 out of 33. First of all, it says 25 for Goshen, and they're all 0 time. Did you not keep track of when they were starting and when they were ending?
Oh,
Because
those
here they all
aren't-
say from and to.
Those aren't Brandon's calls, that's a combination of the state police, both barracks going there, and that was just to show what and that was in regards to the contract for them, to show what their calls for service would be like. Like I said, in 2022, the state police responded to Goshen 12 times. This year so far, there's been 25 calls for service. So that was just to show the select board what we're looking at for numbers as far as like a call for service.
Right, so this is state police. And they don't keep track of the from and to? Because at this point, their call time, their from time, and their to time are all identical, so we don't have any idea how long they spent on the call.
That is department individual. We all have the same, it's a system called Valport, it's a dispatch system, and as far as I know, there's a screen that says dispatch, or assigned dispatch response and then clear. So it should document each time. I got that directly out of Valport, so.
It seems difficult to be useful as far as determining how much time you might be spending if you responded to these calls. A second thing I was curious about is that, when I did EMT over in Williamstown, Vermont, there was contracts with a larger town next door, and they did it on a per capita basis. And it seems like if people are going to be experiencing the benefit of the Brandon Police, that would be a model that I would like to see at least explored, is that whatever we're paying in taxes for police, they should pay in taxes for police. So they're basically getting the same coverage, which is when they pick up the phone and call, they get a policeman.
And I agree with you 100% on that. And there's different models used as far as what it would cost. Some departments do it on a fee basis. This is just a basic one I put down is to be illustrative, but you can do it per capita, you can do it per call. There's a variety of different ways you can do
Well,
it.
if we go forward, I would like to see that comparison.
Okay.
The third question I have, it says, when you mentioned that, we have the capacity to serve these other communities, that seems to imply that we have a surplus capacity in Brandon. And if that's the case, I would love to understand what that surplus is. Because I had thought that our police department was supposed to be size sufficient for our community. And so how do we have a surplus?
I never say we have a surplus, but we do have the ability to, with our call volume it is right now, and since, like I said, we would only be handling emergency calls, it would not be a stretch for us to be able to respond. Basically, like I said, it would be looking at it as an extension of Forestdale. Geographically, it's not that big. It would not, and like I said, their call volume is not that large that we couldn't take it up as part of some additional duties for our department. We're in no way, in any stretch or manner, like heavy with officers, believe me, if anything.
I'm not suggesting heaviness, but clearly if we have the capacity to serve other communities, we have some kind of surplus. That's what I would define as surplus.
Well, right now, I wouldn't suggest taking, I would say that we could do Goshen. Do I think we could take on anybody else right now? Absolutely not. I don't have the staff for that, but I think we could comfortably do Goshen with what they have for a call volume. But if we were to say, let's say Leicester and Sudbury approached us and said, Chief, we want to sign up for policing services, then like you would actually recommended, we would probably have to do that by a per capita expense evaluation, and at that point, we'd probably have to hire more officers just to cover that. But like I said, we wouldn't have to hire more officers to cover that small addition of the policing contract with them. But we also don't have the capacity to take on multiple agencies right now. Possibly down the line, yes, depending on what they would be willing to pay for that service. And then we could hire more officers. But right now, I would only be comfortable with Goshen. I don't think I would want to take on anybody else.
That's any of my questions.
And if I could just add, interrupt, I think this would be a good litmus test to see if this would be something that's feasible. A lot of times, again, if you look at Pennsylvania, they are very big on regional policing. And what happens is some of these regional police departments go under because they dissolve local police departments, they recreate a new, I'm just going to say it, a bureaucracy to this regional police department. And then some of the towns decide, well, no, we want to go back with our own police department, or we want to contract with somebody else, and then they end up dissolving. I would rather start small and then expand from there, but I wouldn't want to overextend ourselves, because I don't think that would be wise either.
I have one question that you may not know the answer to, but historically, looking back, has the Brandon Police Department always covered sort of the bare essential, the bare like minimum calls in Goshen, like you're describing?
We've never done, we'll go, like I said, we'll assist the state police up there, but
Yeah.
Unless this happened way before my time
Yeah.
as chief, to my knowledge, no, we've never covered calls for service in Goshen. This would be something new as far as I know.
Okay.
So basically, we're talking about the Brandon Police Department doing what VSP is currently doing?
Yes.
Now, you said earlier that if you had a call in Brandon, it's going to be prioritized over Goshen. What happens if we have 2 officers in Goshen and we get a call in Brandon? What's going to happen? I mean, what's going to take priority over that?
It depends on the nature of the case. It would be the same if we went over there for...
I mean, I guess that's what I'm saying. If you're in Goshen and you happen to have both officers that would be on call in Goshen, what happens if we have something happen in Brandon?
Certainly in the EMT world, once you take responsibility, you can't back out.
Oh, absolutely. That actually happens in Brandon quite often, where we're tied up with calls, then we call for mutual aid, just like we go and help these other agencies. It's not unusual. I'll use an example for myself a while back. Chief Warfel from Pittsburgh PD ended up taking a call from me. I was tied up for an intoxicated person, so it would be a mutual aid situation where we could ask other agencies to assist us as well, just like we do to them.
Thank you. Anything else from the board? I'll open it up briefly to the public. If there's any questions from the public that might like to ask anything. All right, none being heard.
So, Mr. Chair,
Yeah.
respectfully, would I have authorization to pursue this with the Goshen Select Board or not?
That's what you're looking for tonight.
Right.
That was my next question as well.
Yes. They generally meet the same
They
date
meet the
and
same
time
night.
as the Brandon
Correct.
Select Board, which will make it challenging. They meet at 6:30 generally, although they canceled tonight's meeting. But I cannot say that they are interested, but I can say that there is interest in a discussion. And I need to be sure that the Brandon Select Board is also willing to have the discussion.
So I guess what we do is, what's the pleasure of the board?
Yeah, I make a motion that we pass over this and not pursue this at this time.
I'll second that.
We got a motion and a second to pass over. Is there any discussion?
I don't know. I think it might be worth investigating what Cushing said.
I agree. I would like to look into it. I'm not saying do it, but to certainly start the discussion and see, given the information that's been presented.
I am concerned that this is going to be a slippery slope of our police department getting larger and larger. And I don't think that's what we should do. That's why I'm trying to avoid going down this path.
Any other discussion?
Yeah, right now, the timing of it, in my estimation, is not good. I'm certainly not in favor.
Any other discussion? And we'll open it up.
I'd like to ask you a question. Exactly what are we going to lose financially if we do it? Or what is going to be added to the police department of Brandon financially if we did do it?
The contract that was presented is in the packet, but it looked like the flat fee for administrative was $4,200 a year, and then each call was $150. Past that, is that correct?
Yes, and if we went to...
That was one thought.
Even if we didn't handle any call at all, we would still charge them the $4,200. So let's say they had I hate using the Q word, but they had a very quiet year in Goshen and basically maybe one or two calls, they would still have to pay that flat fee because obviously we never want to do anything that's not going to benefit this community either. And what we don't, it's like my dad used to say, charity starts at home. So you want to make sure that any benefit is going to come back to the town of Brandon, at the very least that flat fee, even if we don't do anything else with the contract, maybe one or two calls, let's say tops, we would still make that money, which we could put towards lowering our budget. It may seem like a drop in a bucket, but it would be $4,200, possibly less, that we would have to pay to the police department, or put it in towards other things that the taxpayers necessarily wouldn't have to put in for. Let's say we had to save up for a police car, or we didn't do police radios or something. That money could go towards that, and that way we wouldn't have to ask for that in the budget. We could lower it by that. But like I said, we could always put it in a capital fund. There's a variety of different things that you could do with it, but that's no guarantee because sometimes you would have to use all that money for administrative services, fuel, gas for the cars. So you can never predict these things. Anything with public safety, it's never, I wish it was a contract, I wish it was a definite, but it never is. You never know how many burglaries you can have a year, how many fires, how many medical calls. It's really hard to determine.
Any other discussion?
Yeah, I noticed in here that you say that the police department, the Brandon Police Department has K-9 unit and police drone capability, and I didn't realize we had police drone capability. And we have a motorcycle unit.
Yes.
Do we have a motorcycle unit?
Yes, the motorcycle, the Coulter that we have?
And that's considered a motorcycle unit?
Unit, that's what we call it, that's the...
And that can be used for policing?
Yes, we use it right now. We've, matter of fact, that was another thing that I...
It hasn't been sufficient because of its size to do police work with.
Well, probably in Goshen, due to the type of area that is, and because it's so, we'll call it mountainous, that would probably zap the battery fairly quick in that. And I actually had, I didn't know if we were going to discuss it tonight.
That's going to be different, yes.
A different grant, but that other piece of machinery would have a lot more capability where that would be feasible, where the Coulter probably wouldn't for that area. We would probably use a cruiser to respond.
So what do we use the Coulter for now?
Mostly we've been using it for traffic enforcement. We had it out, unfortunately, we had lousy weather this past summer, so we only had it out 12 times. We've been mostly using it for traffic enforcement. Officer Menino's tried to get it out as much as he could, but like I said, the weather's been lousy. And a motorcycle, I'm realistic, is a weather-related type of piece of equipment that you can't use in the middle of winter because we're in Vermont.
Or when it's raining.
To an extent, but we've, like I said, we had such heavy rain that it's not really, it's a safety issue too for a motorcycle when it's raining that much. But Officer Menino, I spoke with him the other day, and we were able to get that out 12 times, and he mostly spends his time in the downtown area when he does it, and mostly uses it for traffic enforcement right now.
All right, I just would like to chime in myself. I guess I can't get behind this until we get a per capita figure. I agree with Mr. Giles that I think we need a per capita figure on what we are in Brandon. And I think it would need to be passed on and have to have that figure, and I have to have more information than what I've got right now before I can get behind this. With that being said, we're going to call the vote. All those in favor, all in favor of Mr. Giles' motion of, repeat that again.
Well, the vote was to not pursue this program at this time.
Or is it tabling it until we have more information? Because it sounds like it's coming from two different directions.
Well, the words I used was to not pursue this.
Right.
At this time. And I'm content with that this time. So, all those in favor of not pursuing it this time signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
Nay.
The ayes have it. Going on to number, whoop.
Is that completely closed, or can I make a motion that we find a per capita number and revisit in a future meeting?
I gave you a per capita number right now.
Oh, well, I make.
Oh, okay, I didn't know.
Okay.
I'm sorry. I didn't.
So if the Brandon Police budget is $850,000 a year, and there's 4,000 people in Brandon, we're at $212 per Brandon person. And if the contract service to Goshen would be $4,200 per year, and there's 172 Goshenians, that would be $24 per person.
And they're getting slightly different, they're getting less service, is the thought.
They wouldn't be getting traffic enforcement.
The population of Goshen is 172.
They would just be getting, just like in Brandon, the officers, when they drive on the.
So if they paid what we're paying, it would be
I think
40,000.
that's one conversation at a time.
What's that? It would be,
Do you want, all right, so here, I'll take the number from the budget for Brandon, which is actually 864,915. And Bill likes to remind me, 4,129.
Yes.
$209 is the per capita in Brandon. And $4,200 divided by 172 is $24. So you can look at this in lots of ways, Mr. Chair, if you will allow me. So two things to interject into the conversation that have not been said yet. One is that Brandon has been talking for many years, certainly while I was on the board, about its role as the sub-regional hub for this part of Vermont, right? We are not as large as Rutland, we are not as large as Middlebury, but we are larger by an order of magnitude than all the other towns that surround us. It's the market town historically for the area. If Brandon wants to continue to provide services like the library, which has a formal relationship with the smaller towns such as we're talking about for contributions, such as the fire department provides service on a formal arrangement such as we're talking about for fire protection, I think that this was a natural kind of conversation to have with Goshen to start with, because of the reasons that the chief said, geographical proximity being the major one. So if we're talking about Brandon's budget for policing, we're talking about $2,000 and change every day of the year. And if we're talking about Goshen contributing $4,200, we're talking about Goshen contributing 2 days out of the year toward the police coverage that we currently fund by ourselves. The second thing that I would like to interject in the conversation that hasn't been brought up yet is that I did go to the League of Cities and Towns annual conference, and I attended a segment that was called Subregional Approaches to Community Police. Actually, Cecil was there. You were at that one too, right? So as Chief Kilpeck mentioned about dispatch, like that's just something that's going to happen. And my takeaway from the conversation at the VLCT conference about policing was this is just something that's going to happen. We are in a position where we have resources that our immediately adjacent communities simply do not have and historically have not had and do not appear to have the resources to launch on their own. Brandon is going to have to be the leader if there's going to be any kind of emergency protection in a 21st century kind of way, meaning more than just a handshake, available to the residents in the other communities. The last part of that, I think, is important, which is that, the chief has said, and our previous chief had said, when we talked about this when I was on the select board with the previous town manager, there will always be a desire and a willingness to extend the helping hand. But it cannot be in a mutual aid kind of way when the other communities do not have something to offer back. It's a different world, right? There's 172 people up there, but it's not as quiet as it used to be in terms of needing emergency response. So I just offer those up to you.
Thank you.
I have a question for Chief Kilpack. For the towns that Brandon offers fire protection, is there a charge? I mean, are we charging those towns for that?
So the fire district has a contract with the town of Leicester for services provided, annual contract, actually it's a 3-year contract. And I'm currently in the middle of signing a contract with the town of Goshen for services provided.
And is
An
it
annual
similar to
contract.
the one the chief has described where there's an
Yes, so
administrative?
traditionally on our, however old it is, handshake, with the town of Goshen, the Brandon Fire Department has provided fire protection to the town of Goshen on a per-call basis. Whereas if we go there one time, they get 1 bill. If we go there 10 times, they get 10 bills.
And is it a flat fee per call, or is it based on the
It
nature
is,
of the call?
so the new contract will be a flat rate contract. Versus a hybrid model of a flat fee plus billing or strictly billing.
Okay, thank you.
But it's continually, if I could add to that, be it volunteer or career, anything in emergency services is continually losing people. And regionalization of various emergency services is happening countrywide. Mutual aid agreements are strong up here. There was a call this morning, and Pittsburgh came up to assist us for that call this morning. I know the ambulance has been running back and forth. Middlebury comes here for calls, Regional comes here for calls, and we go to Middlebury and Rutland for calls just as well. Middlebury and Rutland are career services. They are full-time paid staff. Brandon Rescue is not. But if you don't have enough people to cover the volume of calls, then you call for mutual aid. It's not going to, the trend is not showing it getting better.
Really?
Yeah, just throw in another 2 cents on the financial angle is, last year, while I was serving on the Otter Valley Bug District Board, there was the possible expansion to take over calls in Proctor, et cetera. And the process that they really went through on that is going out and doing the calls, like the chief is saying, or the fire department on a contract basis, is wonderful. You get reimbursed some for your expenses, but it doesn't kick in at all for your equipment and all of your police cars and everything else that we're paying out in our budget. And clearly what the district did was looked at all of their assets and all of their liabilities, and when Proctor was trying to come on, they were gonna have to buy in based on their population size compared to the other districts. So I would say, you know, just letting Goshen in, and we're gonna cover them and send them a bill, is a losing proposition when we're spending $40,000 on a police cruiser without the realization that, you know, it has to be a lot more than that. I think we've had these handshake deals for years. I know when I was on the fire department many years ago, we had fires up in Goshen, and there'd just be a bill that they would pay, but they're not really covering their fair share, so
Right.
I throw that out.
And I would just like to say that at $150 per call, if an average call is 2 hours in time, that's $75 an hour. We're paying the officers half of that at least.
But I do think down the road, we're gonna come to this as a regional service, really.
I know that there's 4,200, but like Mr. Bailey just said, you've got an expense of police cars, and that 4,200 would cover that. So I think that we need the Goshen, whatever, we need to go back to the drawing board just as far as to what we, the town, and Goshen can build and come in with that. That is my opinion.
Well, if we were to charge them per capita the same that Brandon pays per capita, it would be $36,000.
The only thing I would say, and my reaction is that I'm interested in doing this, I just think they would need to pay more because that doesn't seem like enough, quite frankly. My only question is, so if you took that, you know, $36,000 figure, what, I mean, and it sounds like you probably have the data to say like X percentage of our time on average is taken up by calls, X percentage of our time on average is taken up by proactive policing, and then they would need to pay the parts that are not proactive policing.
In this presentation that I made in regards to the contract is absolutely flexible. This was just something to put it out there to see if they would be interested. Nothing was written in stone. So like I said, there's multiple models of how you could go, like I said, by per capita or per call for service. There's, like I said, for all the regional and county agencies that are around the United States, they all do it differently. Some county police departments do it by the tax base, some do it on a contractual basis, some do calls per service, some do per capita. So we could absolutely look at a different financial model as far as recouping the town of Barnstable for what it would cost to take on that contract. So it's absolutely flexible. It would just be a matter of what would Goshen be willing to pay at the end of the day.
And I mean, I'm going to stop everything there. I think it's pretty much, it's the majority of the board that it's agreed that we aren't satisfied with this particular contractual model, that maybe they could come back with a different one. And I'd like to move on to something different unless Heather would like to make a motion.
Yeah, I would like to make a motion. I'd like to make a motion that we pursue this with a per capita pricing that would take into consideration what Brandon is paying per resident and the percentage of the services that Goshen wants to contract. So if it takes, I don't know what the percentages are.
You need to make a motion that can be written in a sentence.
Sure.
try one more
So
time.
my motion is that we allow the town manager to pursue formal contract with Goshen that would be a per capita basis, taking into consideration what Brandon residents are paying per capita for police services.
Would you read the motion back, please?
When I finish it.
The long one, sorry, Charlie.
And was anybody going to second it?
I will second it.
Motion by Heather and Cecil to allow the town manager to pursue formal contract with Goshen that would be per capita, taking into consideration what Brandon residents are paying per capita.
And we'll open it for discussion with the board.
So regardless of the price, I oppose bickering our police department. And so whatever the fee is, I'm not in support of making our police department cover more areas.
And I would say that we're not enlarging the police department. We are taking into account the realities of policing in a rural state. And so I also support the idea of at least exploring it.
I would say that right now, what I'm hearing from Chief Kachajian is that he feels a moral obligation to do this, and that this is sometimes happening anyway, out of collegial, I don't know, between, I don't know. Yeah, like between communities, like you help other communities, so you're feeling obligated to do it anyway, morally obligated. This will allow us to be compensated for what the police officers feel like they are morally obligated to do and have been doing within reason. And it sounds like you have made it very clear that Brandon takes priority so far, and
Absolutely.
we should just
And it always will.
maybe get paid for some of the stuff you're doing
And
out there.
And I also think it is important to keep in mind, as the town manager pointed out, that Brandon serves a role as a sub-regional hub. I mean, we draw from the region, we also give back to the region, and it's just another consequence of being a sub-regional hub is that for the towns that are much smaller than us, that we offer this opportunity to them to be as safe as we are.
Any more discussion? I'm going to ask Charlene to read the motion one more time, if you would.
Motion by Heather Nelson, seconded by Cecil Renner Smith, to allow the town manager to pursue formal contract with Goshen that would be per capita, taking into consideration what Brandon residents are paying per capita.
All right, we're ready to vote the motion. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
Nay. Moving on to Vermont Community Development Program. Town manager.
I ask Mr. Moore to bring this to the board.
So this is to keep us in line with the opportunity to get more VCDP grants. Specifically, right now, we're in the middle of a VCDP grant that we applied for on behalf of the Brandon Free Public Library. The select board signed a similar document to this in April, I believe, of this year. This is the newest version of that document, taking into consideration some of the executive orders that have been issued around employment practices. And if you want to remain eligible for these grants, you guys will need to sign off on this. And if we want to make sure the library is able to get the money that we already started the process with, we would sign off on this. You would need to sign off on this.
What's the pleasure of the board?
I move that we adopt the new version of the Vermont Community Development Programs, Municipal Policies and Codes, Form MV-1.
Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Let's say I'll second for discussion.
Yeah, sorry.
Any discussion?
It's interesting to realize that Cecil and I have been spending some time with Seth, working on employment policy, what's the title of the word? Personnel policy. And I guess I question whether or not this is going to supersede our personnel policy. It's quite involved.
Well, in terms of its legal effect on our personnel policy, it's really, we just need to make sure that our personnel policy is consistent with this. Like, for example, if you look to the Drug-Free Workplace Act of 1988, what they suggest is that if this municipality does not already have a drug-free workplace policy, that it is at least as robust as the following. It then provides what the policy should be. And so what we would just need to look at is what our policy currently states and whether it's consistent with this or at least as robust as it is.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
But this is not significantly different from the one that we approved in April. And if we do not approve it, we will not be eligible for grants from this particular resource.
That's correct.
Is your concern that it's redundant, Tim?
No, I think my concern is that it may require us to do things that we wouldn't do otherwise. But as Cecil pointed out, most of this is just legal things that we have to admit that we're doing legally, so there shouldn't be a problem.
Any other discussion? If not, we're ready to vote the motion. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Let's have it.
Thank you, Board.
Number 10, consider financial projections received for proposed town-owned solar array. Mr. Hopkins?
So, Mr. Chair, in the packet, there is a cover letter which talks about one site, which the board is aware of, and two different scenarios of financing a solar array pursuant to the select board's authorization of allocating some ARPA toward that. However, also in the packet, which was received following my writing of that cover sheet, are two projections for a solar array in a different location, and that location is at the Brandon Industrial Park, adjacent to the current solar installation that the town leases with Green Lantern. So currently, it appears that, I mean, the two sites can still be under the board's consideration. The site that was first brought to the board is a privately owned parcel that would entail a lease payment, and the site that's at the industrial park would likely obviate the need for a lease payment, and additionally have the benefit of not disturbing any potentially agriculturally prime soils. So I would recommend that the board move in the direction of pursuing the industrial park site on one of these two models that are presented here. There are also efforts being made by the Energy Committee to have another couple of developers look and see if they can provide similar projections for the consideration of the board.
Thank you.
Thank you.
What's the pleasure of the board?
Yeah, as I understand, what we've designated ARPA money for, it's exactly for the exploration of this possibility. And so with that in mind, I make a motion that the town, per the town manager's recommendation, pursue the industrial park site potential and bring that to us as a proposal.
Do we hear a second?
I'll second that.
It's open for discussion. Any discussion from the board? I'm going to start with, this was supposed to be I'm going to call it a trifecta with the fire district and the school district. And then all of a sudden, from everything I've read or whatever, it's turned into a town project. And I don't know if that's the way that it was intended on spending the ARPA money of the $60,000.
Right, as I understand it, the final composition of the deal was not finished. And I think what the ARPA money was supposed to do was to give the ability to explore a site and to possibly pay any exploratory fees involved with that. And that once we get to where we actually have a finished project, then we'll have exactly that discussion of like, is this going to be just the town, or is this going to be?
And, I mean, as I have said in the past, and I'm still, and I've been in contact with one environmental agency on the decommissioning end of things. And it bothers me quite a bit on the cost that is on the decommissioning. That I think that nothing has been explored or anything on that nobody can give any good cost of that. And from the environmental people that I've talked to, they can't give a cost other than the fact that they can tell, and they have provided me with several websites that I've done some research on, and I will be glad to share that with anybody that would like it, on just the stuff on decommissioning.
Yeah, I'd love to have a little bit more conversation on the decommissioning, because you know, if somebody asked you, you know, what are your plans for decommissioning your dump truck? The truth is, when you buy a dump truck, you know that when you're done, you're going to sell it to someone who needs a lesser dump truck, and you're going to have something left over. And currently, that's the way solar works. When you're all done, you have something of value, and it's maybe worth a lot. It may be worth a lot less, but it has value.
It has value, but I mean, everything that I have read upon this, on the decommissioning end of things, is that this was supposed to be for green energy. And when this all happens on the decommissioning, the bigger percentage of the solar arrays end up in a landfill. There is a percentage that I have read upon that does not end up in a landfill, that is recyclable, but a big percentage of this ends up in a landfill. And how that could be green and energy when you're at the end of 20 to 30 years, the amount of solar panels that is projected that would be ended, that would end up in landfill, that kind of bothers me. And the other thing is, stuff that I have read upon, and maybe I've read it wrong or been misinformed from what I've read, that it's possible that halfway through your life expectancy of these solar panels, there's a good chance that you're going to replace panels 100%. And like I said, this is just what I have read.
I'd love to see the information.
And I would be glad to pass that on. I'd be glad to pass the website or the stuff that I have from, and I'm sorry, I had the card with me and I left it on my desk of the environmental people that had given me this information.
So there is a secondary market for used solar panels and solar installations, because even though they may reach the end of what we would be trying to get out of them, they may still be sufficient to be used somewhere else that might have fewer needs. And developing countries, there's a large secondary market for solar panels, solar installations. And I think, and part of the problem, and I think this is something that Mr. Hopkins and I have discussed, is the word decommissioning is kind of a scary word, because people my age, at least, associate it with nuclear power facilities. And what you do when you decommission a nuclear reactor, and then you have all these. But that's not what's happening here. What's happening here is we have things that can be plucked out of the ground, Some of the metal can be recycled, some of them can be resold. We're not creating brownfields, we're not creating a Superfund site. The land is immediately reusable for something else. And so I think, you know, I wish there were a better word than decommissioning, because I think that word scares people.
And I don't disagree with that the land's gonna be reused. What I'm saying is the material that's been on the land, where it's going to. I mean, as I said, it's supposed to be a green incentive, and if 50% of that field ends up in a landfill, I don't know how we can consider that green.
And I'd love to see that data, because everything I know is exactly the opposite of that.
And and there's other things that I also within this that are with the state. I think, from what I understand, the state, there's going to be some stuff coming down in the state that'll talk on getting rid of some of this stuff also on a state level. I think some of that's within that. I didn't have time to read it all, but like I said, I would be glad to forward it on.
Well, I think bringing it into an agenda item where, if we're going to talk about these things, we should probably have, the information.
Right. Any other discussion? We have a motion on the floor, and it was open for discussion.
Can you repeat the motion, please, Charlene?
Okay, motion by Tim, seconded by Heather, for the town manager's recommendation to pursue the industrial site model and bring it back to the select board for consideration.
I think it was the second by
I
Cecil.
seconded it.
Cecil
You
seconded it.
I seconded
Oh,
it.
sorry.
Yeah. I'm like, wait.
It's a good sign. I didn't remember the motion.
Oh my goodness.
Okay. Thank you, Charlene.
Public comment?
We'll open it to public comment, if there is any.
You know, I think I gave some information to Jim Emerson maybe 2 or 3 months ago about how panels are being developed that are becoming more green and going to be able to go on the market as recyclable. And I don't, and because I mentioned why, if that's true, if they're going to be out there, we can buy them, then why not wait till we get something that can be recyclable, and then we would be part of, creating a better system of recycling and repurposing things, as opposed to just taking them to the landfill.
Mr. Emerson?
I can get that information again if you want.
Yeah, the, solar panels are changing dramatically. Their cost apparently has come down 99% since 1977. And they have become more recyclable as time has gone on. Europe has set standards for what the qualities of materials have to be for any manufacturer to sell in Europe. And therefore even China has upgraded their recyclability of the panels. And the industry standard has been that the panels degrade about 0.5% in terms of their productivity a year. And that, for many commentators and people who are watching the industry, that's very generous allowance for deterioration of the panel's productivity. And there's some saying, that after 15 years or so, it's hard to measure that they've degraded that substantially. These are people who are nonprofit. This is a comment I heard from a nonprofit group in the Midwest that studies these kind of concerns. They're saying they just don't see that level of degradation. So after 40 years, your panels are 20% less productive in the worst case. So you got 80% productivity. Would you throw your car away if it has 80% of its miles left on it? I don't think so. So I think we're talking about a time frame that these panels are lasting that's substantial and reliable and beneficial, and I don't think any project that town got involved would go away after 40 years, other than the fact you have to deal with the land issue. So so that's all I have to say. I think the opportunity here is that, well, as efficiency Vermont says, the most expensive thing you can do in a circumstance like this is nothing. You have a chance to save upwards of $1 million over the life of this, over a 35-year picture here. Maybe 800,000 by the time it all comes together, I don't know, but it's not nothing. It's a huge opportunity. There are 18 other towns who undertook this kind of project before they got the 30% rebate. There are towns like Colchester who's on their third and fourth projects because they are making, saving taxpayer money and want to continue to do so. So I'd encourage the board to pursue this further.
Thank you.
If that's the case, why isn't the solar company knocking on the door of the industrial parks to do this to make money like we have in Green Lantern?
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
I can tell you why another company is not knocking on the door to do this. The town of Brandon can borrow money at half the cost of inflation, and a private company is going to borrow money at the market rate. That's why it makes more sense for a town to do this than for a private company to do this without the town.
If there's that much money to actually made, I don't think there is.
Well, if we're borrowing at 2% or 3.8%, when mortgage rates have just touched 7%, and they're borrowing at some range above what we're borrowing, they're not going to make $1 million from it. We're going to make $1 million from it over the course of the project's life, even which is over 25 years, not 35 years.
On paper.
Money is paper.
Call the question. All those in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Aye. Or nay. The ayes have it.
Gotta watch that.
Yeah, I do. I caught it though.
You did?
Yeah. And I didn't say selectmen either yet.
Darn it.
All right.
Darn it,
Yeah.
Casey.
Yeah, I know you were looking forward to that.
I know.
It was Heather's turn.
Number 11, funding for electric car charging station, end of warranty. We're going to bring that.
So this was added to the agenda at the request of a select board member. They could take it if they want, or I can, the information in the packet was provided by a different select board member. They could take it, and it's up to the board how you want to pursue this. I did leave you on your desks tonight this little chart, which I'm kind of glad I calculated during the day today. I emailed it to you because I'm not sure I would have been able to do it tonight on the calculator online, depending on the internet status right at this moment. So you can lead the discussion however you'd like, whoever you'd like to lead the discussion.
Well, I actually had a question about the thing in the packet about federal funding, because it sounds like that's for ones that aren't working, and
Right.
ours are working, correct?
That's correct.
So far, so good.
But the discussion that we had previously has all been around what happens when the warranty expires.
Right,
Which is assuming that there's some cost associated with repair.
right, but this. Thanks.
Oh my God. I think I'm being hacked. I think I'm being hacked, I'm not sure.
Right, but the way I read this, it sounds like this is money that's available now for things that are broken now. and
Yes,
not-
This is not relevant for our use anymore.
okay.
I think it was more just information in general.
Okay.
And it does, I will say, it was echoed by the two people I spoke with from Green Mountain Power today that, there is an awareness at the utility and, federal and state government level that these stations will have a life cycle to them, and that there will be there will be a public interest and a utility interest in creating programs that allow you to either repair them if they're repairable or replace them if they're replaceable.
No.
Um,
I have a question.
We're still open to discussion from the board, and somebody needs to,
Make a motion.
Oh,
well,
great.
make a motion, or, I guess,
Sure.
Mr. Town Manager, anyone that had brought them, either one of these together, put this into something.
Yep.
So what I had said at the last meeting, I still feel okay about, which is that I'm comfortable with an increase. I just want to make sure that we are not charging more than the neighboring communities and taking into consideration that there are some places that are still in the free time. So, you know, I would like to make sure that we don't make people not want to use our charger, but just to charge like what towns near us are charging seems reasonable, which would be a slight increase. Not quite the increase that was proposed last time, but something, sort of some middle ground, felt very comfortable to me and made sense to me in terms of being ready to replace it and making sure that we had a little bit of money ready to replace it whenever it dies or needs fixed or what have you.
And whether we take this on our own or keep up with the warranty, if we keep up with the warranty, we're still gonna have to raise a few more funds to cover the warranty.
Yes.
And I would suggest that we shouldn't continue with the warranty.
I
I think the warranty doesn't make fiscal sense. The cost to replace it will be less than the cost of the warranty.
So maybe we'll start small. I move that when the warranty ends, that we do not renew it.
I second that.
Any discussion?
I think it's a good, obvious first step.
All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye. Aye. That's the first part.
I still have some concerns from the last meeting about this discussion. I was really surprised that the discussion that happened at the last meeting was over in like 8 minutes. Nobody talked about maintenance, nobody talked about plowing, nobody talked about lighting. It was just all about the charging station itself. So I did some research on the data, and basically 20 to 25 cents for low-level kilowatt is what's being charged around Vermont. And then you talk about getting a high, they call it a third-level charging station. That's supposedly 40 to 60 cents. So it's sort of like, and we're just at the beginning. We have 2 stations, and there's like 1% of Vermont right now has electric cars, which may not seem like a lot, but when you break it down to communities, it is. So what we're doing now with the way, structuring it the way we're going to pay for it, is going to be what we're paying for 10 years down the road. So wouldn't it make better sense now to put the price right that would cover the cost of maintenance and anything else associated with it, and then the cost is in place as it grows. And then the cost can grow with the use of the stations. Nobody talked about that. Nobody talked about maintenance. I mean, I walked over there. The plowing and lighting. They have to be factored into the budget, don't they?
The plowing and the lighting happen on all the streets in Brandon, and so that's something that's entirely separate from talk about electric. And when you talk about maintenance, I would like to see any demonstrated cost, because for someone who's driven an electric car for 8 years now and own an electric charging station in my house, it's like suggesting you need maintenance on your microwave or something. It's an electronic head that has basically no maintenance. There's no moving parts. Yes, if it gets damaged because somebody backs into it, that happens, but that's covered by insurance. In other words, it's not a matter of it wearing out, it's a matter of it getting damaged. And so I think until we incur a cost, I think it doesn't make sense to suggest that there's these impending costs coming at us. And I'm completely ready to entertain the discussion when we do incur a cost of whether we want to keep it. Because at this point, it's cost us nothing. And if we really don't like it, we can just let it go away. It hasn't cost us anything. It's just a positive for our town.
I disagree with you. I think you're mixing apples with oranges when you talk about private use and a private charging station in your house, and you talk about public use. One, you're talking about many more people involved. You're talking about much more breakdown. I just don't think those
I'd love to
two
see you
can
demonstrate the
discuss
cost,
together.
because those don't exist.
Well, I'm just looking at the maintenance myself. I'm gonna go back there, even though it's public and we do it all over town, that's what you're saying. It's sort of, you know, it just seems like there's an area where some people that have a lot want to be cheaper than people that have nothing and would like to have more. And I would just like to have some kind of a conversation that deals with maintenance of that parking lot. Because it does have to stay lit, with snow plowing over there. If we're doing this publicly, I mean, do we own the parking lot?
Yes.
We do.
And do we own the land that the gas station's on?
No.
So it stops at the parking lot? So who plows the gas station?
They have a contractor.
Who keeps their lights on?
They do.
Okay. I didn't know that. I was just looking for information.
So if I can just throw out some facts, right? So the parking lot behind the
Right.
donuts and the gas station, the town bought with a town meeting vote in about 2015 or 16. We then paved it and put the lights in. Those were done under one grant, which we've just tidied up and closed out. And the charging stations came to the town through another grant, which was actually before we even got the parking lot kind of fully done. So the town decided that that parking lot was in the interest partly and maybe primarily to serve events in this building, so that there would be convenient parking for the public to utilize the new town hall, but also for general downtown parking reasons. So, right, the maintenance costs and the lighting costs of that parking lot were something that the town took on through a town meeting vote, and which we will have whether or not we have charging stations there.
I see. So the opportunity to gain monies coming into the town to help the town with the budget wasn't necessary. People are just gonna, the plowing and the lighting is just gonna go on, and it's gonna basically be for free for people that then go in and use the charging stations.
Well, it'll be for the people using the charging stations and the people who use the other 21 spots in the parking lot.
Right.
Like it's a public amenity, yes.
Okay. I just really wanted to be clear on that, because it's been confusing, that area.
Going down there, the whole thing is just plowed anyway. Like all winter, that whole town
yeah.
lot is just plowed anyway. And during big events, people just park in the car charging spots for the big town hall events, and I guess they're just unavailable for a couple hours. We missed that $4.
We got another question
Right.
back in the
Right.
corner.
It's more common, driving an electric vehicle, living on Conan Square. As far as I understand, when there is snow in the forecast, I'm asked to actually park in that back lot behind the now Dunkin' Donut, which I really appreciate that it's lit up and that it is plowed, although there are times when you have to dig out your vehicle. The other piece, just as a bit, I travel a lot and I depend on charging stations being available as a network. I find myself looking for charging stations, and because charging takes time, quicker, longer than gassing up your car, it's very likely that I go into a town I would not spend time in otherwise, and have lunch or find something that I didn't even know I needed. I would imagine I'm not alone in that, and that's just my reality as an electric vehicle driver. I'm not saying that's everybody's reality, I'm just trying to kind of give that perspective, that's all.
Thank you. Yeah.
I heard Mr. Giles talking about his charging station and I thought that's nice. It's probably never been vandalized.
True.
And I'm wondering, there are charging stations at every highway rest stop?
Is that a question or a statement? Because
So-
it's not yet.
No.
You'll say it isn't, not
It's,
really, no.
the ones that I've stopped at,
Many of them have them, but certainly not all.
most of them, but I'm not commenting on the frequency of occurrence of charging stations. But that they've been there for a while, and they must have some statistics as to how long they last. In a situation that's much more typical of public charging stations than private charging stations. And that is not a question either, but I think it would be worthwhile to get that information, rather than compare everything to how much Tim's station costs to maintain.
I would note that if it's vandalized, insurance would cover the repairs.
And I just want to chime in that I drive quite a bit myself, and am on the road quite a bit myself. And I don't expect, as a taxpayer, I don't expect the town of Brandon to buy my gas for my vehicle. Whether I get 50 miles a gallon or I get 5 miles a gallon. And as a taxpayer, I don't expect to pay for somebody else's battery being charged or anything else. I mean, that's where I stand on the subject. I think that everybody needs to pay their share on this, and I think we need to come up with a fair, reasonable rate that will work. You had another question?
Just kind of in response to what the gentleman over there was saying, having traveled a lot, unfortunately, a lot of the stations that I find for charging are not in great locations where you want to hang out for half an hour. So, again, I appreciate that Brandon has one where you want to hang out for half an hour or more.
Thank you.
Can I ask, are we losing money on the charging station now? I thought we were breaking even or making a little.
Not a penny.
We're not losing anything.
It's like within $100.
We're not making any, we're not losing it.
They
We're
didn't-
making like $100 a
they-
year.
They did not cost us anything to install, and the rate was set by ChargePoint at the time that we began charging, so that it would break even and generate a very, very small margin, which is, it's like around 15 cents per session. So on a year basis, I think we calculated $120 or $111 or something like that.
So what Tracy's saying is we're not paying.
We are not.
At this point, at this rate, we're not paying for people's gas. Correct?
No.
Right, and I guess the concern is that we are not creating a sinking fund for future costs, whatever those may be. I had a question about the charge point fees and whether they are flat regardless of what we choose to charge, or if they are percentage based, so the more we charge, the more we end up paying them for the fees.
So the way it actually works is kind of the backwards commission. So we don't get paid and then pay ChargePoint. The user pays ChargePoint and then ChargePoint pays us, holding back 10%. To answer your question, it's a percent.
And that 10%, I mean, it doesn't go up to like 25%. The more we charge.
I don't believe so. I tried 12 different scenarios,
Yeah.
and I did not receive a result that would make me wonder, oh, did something just change? Although the scenarios, I will say, were giving me the driver's cost for a 2-hour session. They were not giving me the town's net.
Right.
I would say that I'm comfortable with it as is. I'm also comfortable adding an increase to the fee as a sort of middle ground in terms of having a little bit more income from it, so that when we're needing to replace it, which we know it's a machine, it will eventually need to be replaced, then we're covered. But, and it also seems so marginal per use that I don't think, I mean, I think for an individual, it sounds like it's gonna be a difference of like $1 per charge. Like, it doesn't seem like a major, like an
Determined.
yes, or like it's gonna be a major impact to the drivers, but if it is feeling like a major impact to the town, then that seems like reasonable to me to increase it. And I don't really see why you wouldn't, because it sounds like, I mean, from my one-person case study of Dorothea over there, that people are sometimes choosing chargers based on where they wanna be, and you might pay $1 or $2 more to not be in the boonies by yourself charging your car on the side of the highway, or because you have a couple errands and could sit at the coffee shop in Brandon. So it seems like maybe those are the bigger things in why you choose a charging station rather than like $6 versus $4. So I'm happy to increase it a little bit, and I'm pretty much comfortable with any of these scenarios. I would like to be comparable with the towns near us, just because there's no reason to like make it way more expensive. We could just do a small increase.
In my conversations with the town manager and trying to keep it equitable with other towns, I'd like to make the motion, we go to 25 cents per kilowatt hour, $1.25 per hour plugged in.
Which is not one of the scenarios.
I was gonna say, it's not one of those scenarios, I'm sitting there looking at
So now,
that.
that's okay, so now I'm just gonna do the math.
That's fine.
Do the math.
I would,
Do you want me to try it?
Yeah.
And
right
when you're
now it's
trying to math,
17.75. Yeah.
Mr. Jupiter had a,
Oh, internet's back.
We have a motion, we need a second.
do we have a second?
I'll second that. I mean, I will second it because I'm comfortable with any of these.
We're gonna open it for discussion.
Board first?
Actually, yeah, we'll start with the board first.
Sure. I think that your argument's a good one. I don't expect the town to pay for people's gas when they come to our town. But by the same token, I don't expect for people to have to pay more than they need to pay just because of the grant. And the cost of electricity, as we just found out, we're breaking even now. In other words, we're actually charging people what it costs for them to use the service. And thus, it's an equitable rate that we're charging. And I think we should keep it the same as what it is.
There you go.
I did have a question about where does the money from the charging stations right now, where does that end up? Does that go into the general fund? Does that go into its own fund?
General fund.
So if you guys want to have a fund set up for future costs, should that money be going into a fund reserved for that?
That was one question I had also, actually.
I slightly question whether we would establish a sinking fund for any other item that costs $5,000. Like,
Okay.
this is not general, it's not really even capitalizable expense.
Right.
It's very small.
Yeah.
Okay.
Sinking funds in for big.
Yeah, that's fine. That answers the question that I had also. 'Cause
Is
I
that
shared
gonna
the
answer yours?
question.
Will that answer your question? Any more discussion?
Just one second. So
No, we're,
I've got
we're
it.
on answer.
25 cents.
And
$1.25.
125.
Yeah, thank you. What are we at right now for rates?
17 cents and 75 cents.
So 25 cents an hour and $1.25 an hour. ChargePoint says $5.80 for a 2-hour session.
Compared to what?
$3.74.
The range of these,
$2.06.
for anybody who's not looking, is between $3.74 and $6.96. So it's basically between $7 and $3.75. Like, it's such a small difference.
That's almost 100%. I mean, when you say it's such a small
Absolutely.
difference, this is something that's 100%. So like, it would be a difference between buying gas at $3 a gallon or $6 a gallon.
I'm also assuming that you do a 2-hour session and it's a difference of $3.
Again,
You
if the
fill
difference
the car.
between buying $3 a gallon or $6, don't mistake the fact that it's $3 as somehow that's a small thing. It's twice the cost.
Okay.
So if it's 17 cents per kilowatt, that also does not take into account when you look at your electric bill, all the like 10 other charges that Green Mountain Power has on your electric bill.
But the per hour cost that they pay to be plugged in
Right.
covers the light bills. Those two things together cover
Okay.
the light bill.
We're gonna call the question. You want to repeat your motion, Charlene?
Okay, motion by Brian, seconded by Heather to increase to 25 cents per kilowatt hour and $1.25 for plug-in.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
Opposed?
Ayes have it. Going on to fiscal.
It's done.
Yeah.
Wow, Seth, efficiency.
Magic.
Whoa.
How's that work, huh?
Pay no attention to the man behind the curtain.
They were supposed to go on and do this,
Yeah. Starting with the fiscal, what is the board's pleasure? Starting with the purchase order.
I make a motion that we do not accept the motion.
Pay the bills.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Discussion.
We do not need a motorcycle. I called Bernie Sanders' office and had a wonderful discussion with the person who handles these kinds of things. And she said that what they want more than anything is for public funds, federal funds, to be used responsibly and in a way that is the best for the community. And I told her that what we really need is to be moving into electric police cars, because an electric motorcycle is not going to replace a police car in any way. And that, in fact, as the police chief helpfully pointed out, our current motorcycle, electric motorcycle, went out 12 times this year. I used to ride a motorcycle. The truth is, when it gets cold, it's not the time to be in a motorcycle. And when it rains, it's really not a great time to be in a motorcycle. There's a lot of the time in the region of the country we live when motorcycles are not appropriate vehicles for police departments. And so I think it was a mistake to seek this grant, and I think it would be a mistake to receive it, because this is not a good use of public funds.
Did the person you talked to at Senator Sanders' office say whether they had any ability or inclination to allow us to use the money for something else?
Excellent point. I talked with her about that, and she said that she's going to work on that, and she thinks that there's a possibility. She wasn't ready to commit to an answer, yes or no, but she assured me that she'd be getting back to me in the next few days to see if, in fact, that grant money could be used more appropriately.
Mr. Chair, I believe Chief Kachajian also has
Yep.
information in that regard.
So I did speak with my contact at the Department of Justice, and just like Mr. Giles said, the original grant that I put in for was for an updating of current police fleet. That was the title of the grant. I'm still waiting to hear back from them, but what I was told is we may be able to put this towards an electric cruiser if I had money in my budget for a cruiser, which I don't, so that's sort of a moot issue. But it is possible that we could do that, and it would not be considered a supplanting. I'll have to, if in fact this is something we can do, I would have to go back in and rewrite the grant and do a couple little different steps to it, but it may be feasible to do that. But like I said, I don't have money for a cruiser anyway, so it's sort of a moot issue, but it is possible.
Perhaps we should once again table this until we have more information from Senator Sanders and the Justice Department.
How long of a response time or on this grant, or how long is it good for?
Usually it's good for up to a year from the time it's issued, so I should have maybe by July.
The woman I spoke to said this was a 2022 grant.
This was a 2022 grant?
The federal, if one thing the federal government is not quick. So these grants, when you put it in, it takes a while for these to process. So this was, I put in for this almost at the same time that we got the grant money from Green Mountain Power to get the Coulter motorcycle, which we have now. And I put in for this not in anticipation of getting this, and then when I heard the good news that we got it, that's what kind of changed things. But like I said, these grants are not quick when you put in for them, and they're usually, just to write them can take months sometimes, so.
I think part of what I'm concerned about is you taking us in a direction that I'm not convinced we want to go. I mean, when you say you put in a grant for the first motorcycle, I don't ever remember having a conversation about whether we should have a motorcycle division. And with this grant, I don't remember ever having a conversation whether we thought we should get another motorcycle.
The reason I did it initially, because I was trying to move this towards green energy, which I thought was what the town wanted.
If you had wanted us to have green energy, your last vehicle would have been an electric car. Your last vehicle was a gas-powered Explorer.
And that money was put in before I became chief of police.
The car is a gas-powered Explorer.
And it's also, I didn't have enough money to purchase an electric car. Right now, a basic.
What you paid for that Explorer, you could have bought an electric vehicle.
Not that would fit our needs for the police department. Police vehicles are very specific, and there's certain things that we require for a patrol vehicle that just are like an everyday Tesla. Even though police departments use Teslas for cruisers, they're not designed to be a cruiser. I'll use the Ford Explorer, for example. A lot of people don't realize a police Ford Explorer has 75 additional welds in that frame to keep it from having issues if there's an impact, just like a regular Explorer.
There were police departments all over this country that are using electric vehicles.
And I'm not saying they
So to suggest
aren't.
that somehow our police department is not able to use an electric vehicle is just simply wrong.
And I don't mind going to an electric police vehicle. They're just, at this point in the game, one, I don't have money in my budget for it, and two, they're much more expensive than an internal combustion engine, even
That's
a
also
hybrid.
not true.
The one that I
Data
priced
for
out
that.
recently was $72,000 as compared to a $60,000 internal combustion engine Ford Explorer. The electric one would have been a Mustang Mach-E, which has actually been tested by the Michigan State Police, which was the organization who usually tests police vehicles, whether they're Tahoes, Explorers, you name it, they're sort of the litmus test for it. And there is a police service package Mustang, and there's also a Ford Lightning package right now, but to the best of my knowledge, until the 2024 Chevy Police Blazer comes out, there is not another police certified vehicle that's on the market. The other issue we have to worry about too is the liability for having a non-police certified vehicle. Should the officer get in an accident or something happens, we could get hung out to dry in a lawsuit for not having a police vehicle that's capable of doing
You're
the job.
suggesting that police departments all over this country, and there are many, many, many of them, are all liable for risk with their police?
Yes, I've actually been told by major dealerships in New England. I'm not going to do it because I don't want to embarrass the company, but I was actually told by one of the salesmen to not do this, or if you're going to do it, get a police certified or a police service vehicle, otherwise it could open you up to liability. And remember, like I said, don't get me wrong, I am not anti-electric. I think it's a fantastic idea going forward. I just, like I said, I want to make sure we have vehicles that are going to be appropriate to our law enforcement mission. If the vehicle's not, it's a liability for the officers, for the town, and it's not, sometimes it could be situations where they're not safe to drive in pursuits. I mean, even people who have an everyday electric car, no matter what it is, how many people get into 100+ mile an hour pursuits sometimes? How many times are they rammed by another vehicle? I mean, how many times is the car shot at? We have to worry about the batteries if they get hit. There's a
I'd be
myriad of
glad to
different
get
issues.
you some information from other police chiefs all over the country to help you understand that police departments use electric vehicles safely today.
I'm not saying they're not, and I've actually spoke with chiefs from Vermont who've gone through the exact same situation that we've gone through, and they've actually chosen to go with a hybrid to do a happy medium, but it's still like, I'll use the example of the Ford Explorer hybrid. It's internal combustion engine and electric, best of both worlds, but they're also certified by Ford as a police pursuit vehicle. So that's one of the options they're using. Like I said, I'm not saying we shouldn't use or go to electric cars, but like I said, again, it's a mood issue. I don't have money in my budget to purchase one, so.
What is the current cost of an electric cruiser? Do you know?
What I sell for $50,000. You can get a $10,000 police kit to go on it, so they can run those for about $60,000.
And what did you have, Chief, for?
For the Mustang Mach-E with everything that we need in it was about $72,000. And that's with a state bid.
But we're not talking about.
We're not talking about that.
Currently, we're talking about a motorcycle.
We're talking about a motorcycle. And
So in the motion was to reject the purchase order
To
and the
not
grant?
receive the grant.
Okay. So could I make a friendly amendment to that motion, which is that we not pursue the purchase order, but that we hold off on rejecting the grant until we find out from Senator Sanders or the DOJ if it can be used towards a cruiser?
That's what the person in his office is doing. So yes, that's going to happen whether we vote either way.
Well, we vote to reject the
if
grant.
we go to reject the grant,
They'll just give it to us another way. I'm happy to have you friendly amendment if that's what you'd like to do, because that's basically what's going to happen anyway.
what you want to put in there?
Yeah.
I'll second. Do you need a second for the amended?
Yes.
Okay, I'll second the amended motion by Cecil.
We're going to call the motion. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? You guys have it. Warrant, October 23rd. What's the board's pleasure on that?
I make the motion we approve the warrant for October 23rd, $103,170.89.
Do we have a second?
I'll second that.
Any discussion? All those in favor? Nope, I'm sorry.
I thought there was something wrong. No.
Discussion? All those in favor of the motion to approve the warrant, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Thanks, Bill.
The ayes have it. 13,
Motion to adjourn.
on the paper. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it.